I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So I just want to mention very quickly that Mayor Corsi is going to join us in a bit. He had an 8:30 meeting and said that he was likely to be late, and hopefully I'll catch his eye when he comes in, and we'll break into our agenda so that he can say a few words. I also want to mention that we take safety very seriously, and part of that is to make sure that we have safe meetings and that people have a sense of what to do in case of the unlikely occurrence of an emergency here. So today I'm going to greet the city's fire marshal, who's going to give us instructions from their perspective on what's right to do.
Good morning. I'm the Assistant Fire Marshal here, Ian Hartage, and I'm welcoming you here to Santa Rosa. Thank you for joining us. In case of an emergency, we have two main exits in the back. We also have one right down here to your bottom right. If there is an emergency, please stand up in an orderly fashion and make your way to the nearest exit. If you have any other questions, I'll be here for the next 15 or 20 minutes, and you can reach out to me. If you need anything else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I also want to designate our Executive Director, Tim Sullivan, to call 911. And then in case of medical emergencies, our Chief Judge, Karen Clopton, is certified in CPR and first aid. So thank you. Okay. So, right at this point, this is when we normally take public comment, and there are two microphones at the back and a microphone right here up front. And I'm going to call two names in so that people have time to move to a microphone, and then I'll remind people who's next up. We have 27 speakers, so normally we only allow 2 minutes each. Our first two speakers are local elected officials, so we're going to allow them to speak as long as it takes for them to make their remarks. So we do have a long agenda today, and we want to keep moving, and I will be very tight on the time for most of the folks who did sign up. So thank you. With that, Mike Nichols from the County of Sonoma, and followed by Mark Landon from the city of Cotati.
Slight correction. My name is Michael Nichols, and I am from Cazadero and a director on the Cazadero Community Services District. President Pickard and honorable commissioners, my name is Mike Nichols, and indeed, thank you. And indeed, it is an honor to have the commission select Santa Rosa as a site for your first voting meeting in 2017. We were also privileged last year with former Commissioner Sandoval convening a hearing in Guerneville on rural call completion, another first for CPUC in our region. Sonoma County was the second community in the state to embrace and adopt community choice aggregation. Our forward-looking county and municipal legislative leaders took a giant leap beginning in 2013 to approve a concept new to everyone, which have reaped countless benefits to its ratepayers. I'd like to comment on the positive payback of community choice as it benefits our lower income residents. Since its launch in 2014, average bill savings for Sonoma Clean Power's low income residential customers equals 7.3% of total electric bill charges. And that includes all delivery, generation, and fees. The extremely successful Drive Evergreen incentives went disproportionately to care customers, 30% of incentives versus 20% of our population. Although Sonoma Clean Power's rebate program, through Sonoma Clean Power's rebate program, a total of over 200 electric vehicles were sold or leased within a 7-week period in Sonoma County in November and December of 2016. Most importantly, Sonoma Clean Power enjoys the flexibility to quickly modify its budget and rates in response to local needs through its Community Advisory Committee and Board of Directors. Community choice has been a positive move for our county and our municipalities. So much so that Mendocino County and 3 of its cities have recognized its merits and invited Sonoma Clean Power to supply their generation needs effective June 1st, 2017. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Landman, then Jason Nutt.
Good morning, President Picker, members of the Commission. My name is Mark Landman. I am the Vice Mayor of Cotati, and I'm also a board member for Sonoma Clean Power. So with that, I'd like to welcome you and the rest of the Commission to Sonoma County, the birthplace of Sonoma Clean Power, the second CCA in the state. And looking around and recognize that we probably have mostly Sonoma Clean Power customers in the audience, I thought a few comments on CCA might be appropriate to the Commission. First of all, I'm very pleased to report that Community Choice is accelerating California's transition to renewable energy. Existing CCAs have invested, as you may know, over $1 billion in new construction already in this state, and the good news is more is to come. In fact, all of our operating programs now have more renewable sources than investor-owned utilities. CCAs are becoming an innovation hub for the state's clean energy future, and the reason for that is because CCAs can act quickly. We can run pilot programs, we can build partnerships with local agencies and local companies, and these partnerships get results. One example, Sonoma Clean Power is partnering with our local transportation authority to accelerate electrical vehicle charging installations and cut the cost of grid upgrades by targeting locations that do not require expensive investments that tend to impact ratepayers. So with all this good news, it is still important to point out that local public oversight of contracts, policies, portfolios, and programs is essential to assure that CCAs retain their responsiveness to local needs and indeed remain the community choice entities that they were designed originally to be. This element of local control does produce significant ratepayer and significant system benefits. Programs can be tailored to local needs and can deliver results at a lower cost. Portfolios can choose to invest in local sources to both support local jobs and the local economy. More advanced integration of renewable energy can take place sometimes ahead of state policies. For example, Sonoma Clean Power's Drive Evergreen program is using EV charging in a demand response network to soak up excess solar on the grid. So I'll close my comments this morning by asking you to view this new and perhaps unanticipated advance in our state is a harbinger of something better potentially for our citizens, and to help it work as designed in the best interest of the people of California. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jason Nutt, then Bruce Nyden.
Good morning, President Picker and Commissioners. My name is Jason Nutt. I'm the Director of Transportation and Public Works for the City of Santa Rosa. I welcome you to our wonderful city. It's my intent tonight, or this morning, to talk about your Rule 20A case. I'm voice my support, as well as the support of my fellow directors in the area, in regard to the ALJ's proposed decision relating to the Rule 20A case. We believe strongly that restoring the credits associated with undergrounding utilities in our local jurisdictions is a benefit to the public. It's a benefit to the jurisdiction's ability to be able to provide a cleaner, safer, and more appropriate infrastructure for the community. I understand that there are still processes going on relating to this case, and we would like to make sure that we've had the opportunity to express our support. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bruce Nyden, then Ellen McKnight.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Nyden. It's been my privilege to serve as the president of the North Bay chapter of the Electric Auto Association over the past year. Our organization is based here in Santa Rosa, California, and consists of approximately 200 electric vehicle owners and clean energy advocates throughout Sonoma County. Our mission is to promote rapid EV adoption through education and outreach. We are very fortunate to have a CCA, Sonoma Clean Power, serving as our local clean energy provider. Sonoma Clean Power has sponsored several innovative programs to help expedite the shift from fossil fuels to sustainable renewable power sources. We encourage the CPUC to support the creation of CCAs in California and to assist with the creation of a level 3, that is a DC, fast charging infrastructure to serve as a backbone for long distance travel by EV owners, thereby providing them the possibility to use their EV for all purpose. Many of the major EV makers have already incorporated charging capabilities, fast charging capabilities into their vehicles so that their vehicles can be used for family travel outside of the home work commute areas. Thank you for your time and consideration and making the trip to sunny Santa Rosa.
Thank you. Ms. McKnight, beg your pardon, I'm going to break in for a little bit and ask you to turn the microphone over to Mayor Corsi, who's just joined us.
Thank you, President Picker. And welcome, commissioners, to Santa Rosa. It's great to see a good turnout here today. Want to thank everybody for attending. And again, just welcome you to our city. Had an opportunity to have a good conversation with Mr. Picker last night. Talked about all the wonderful things that you all do and all the wonderful things going on in Santa Rosa. Hope you get to take advantage of our city for a little while other than just sitting here at this meeting. Again, appreciate you being here, bringing the work of the commission to our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for letting us use your lovely facility. And now I'm really jealous of your clean electric powered podium.
Yeah, it does other things, but we won't show that now. Thanks again.
It'll just make me even more envious.
All right.
Sorry. Ms. McKnight and then Peter Alexander.
Thank you for coming to Santa Rosa for your CPUC meeting. We appreciate it very much. I'm also a member of the North Bay Electric Auto Association and was co-chair of the Electric Drive Day this year. I'm also a retired nurse practitioner. I support the Lung Association for their encouraging the use of electric vehicles, and I'm an asthma supporter, so I really appreciate having as much clean air as we can get. One problem for me as a driver of a Leaf, I've been driving it for 6 years, and I plan to continue to drive electric vehicles, is that we don't have the level 3 infrastructure in this state that was promised to us after the energy crisis. And we need more level 3 charging stations on the major roadways in California. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Alexander, then Trish Steele.
Good morning, Peter Alexander Chernoff. The SMART train. I remember Bob Dylan's Long Train Coming, and so too Cat Stevens' Peace Train. And why are PG&E bills so highly insane? Let's open our eyes to clearly see PG&E workers are not the problem of this insanity. Insanity emanates from its CEO and corporate board thieves. One cannot serve two masters, regardless of what one believes. Remember, open eyes to those actively seeking to destroy PG&E in service to Agenda 21. Lightning and thunder from beyond and down under in light of the full sun. False flags. 3 days before the San Bruno detonation, obliterating homes and killing 8, one woman, soon-to-be murder victim, was interviewed on TV screaming about the undeniable gas leak. So why wasn't the gas turned off? CPUC members and friends of Dianne Feinstein made sure that no one of the workers turned it off. CPUC is complicit in the murder of these 8 people. The power of 10, for those that are tired of paying these bills, Everybody agree with 10 Friends to shut things down, pay only $25 a month, or maybe pay nothing at all until the CPUC replaces these radioactive smart meters, which nobody wanted, nobody appreciates, they're not healthy for anybody, and the other ones work just fine. So some of us are goddamn tired of the agenda that's behind the scenes where you appear to be all helpful to everybody, whereas you are complicit in this corruption, you are complicit in the murder of these 8 people, and if it was up to me, I'd have you all arrested right now.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Excuse me, Mr. Alexander. Trish Steele, then Bob Dudney.
Good morning, President Picker and Commissioners. My name is Trish Steele from Mendocino County, and I'm part of the CPUC-funded 4-county North Bay North Coast Broadband Consortium, and I'd like to share some general comments about our consortium. We are working very hard in our planning efforts. We're leveraging our money. We're elevating the broadband conversation, involving county leaders and public safety officials, and we're seeing concrete results. I believe that the work of the consortium is important for us to reach our collective state broadband deployment and adoption goals. The recent PUC GAP data in particular shows how our rural areas need to make more progress so that large geographical areas of California are not left out of the digital economy. I attended the California Broadband Council meeting yesterday in Sacramento, along with Commissioner Peterman, representing the CPUC, and I was particularly impressed with Lloyd Levine's presentation on recent findings on the correlation between broadband and economic productivity. The Center for Digital Broadband Policy spent a year researching whether public investment in broadband yields economic benefit. The answer is yes. We're making progress, and thank you for the investment in our consortiums. We really appreciate it. It'll make California stronger and more united.
Thank you. The Chief Judge is reminding me we have enough sign-ups that we're actually going to reduce the speaker time to 1 minute. There's a beep that comes on when you hit your 1 minute timeline. So again, we have a long agenda. A lot of people have signed up to speak. So to be fair to everybody who wants to speak, please be brief. And thank you. Bob Dudney, then Rick Brown.
I'm Dr. Bob Dudney. I'm a retired...
I think that's why those podiums might be easier up there next time, just because they're up higher, right?
I'm Dr. Bob Dudney. I'm a retired family practitioner.
Can't still hear you, sir.
I'm Dr. Bob Dudney. I'm a retired family practitioner, and I'm here to make sure that the Commission is aware of definitive studies produced by a National Institutes of Health research program that took 2 decades to produce. The study was released about a year ago and provided results nobody wanted to see. Radiated animals in the group that were exposed to radio frequency radiation developed cancers and precancerous tumors. And the laboratory animals in the control group that were not radiated, they saw no such tumors and cancers. I gave to the public advisor a copy of a letter that I submitted to the Federal Communications Commission recently regarding their latest looks at radio frequency devices. So the only moral stance for us now is that until we have some idea what might be a safe level of radio frequency radiation, and the results showed cancers even at levels below what are considered safe now according to FCC guidelines. And that was at the lowest level of exposure. So we don't know what a safe level is, and it's immoral to continue doing any of these things until we know better. Thank you very much.
Rick Brown, then Andy Ferguson.
Thank you. Good morning. Rick Brown, President Terra Verde Renewable Partners. I'm here to speak on the CPUC's decision in January regarding the TOU shift and grandfathering. And I want to encourage the commissioners to take a look at the petition to modify that decision because of the hardships that the original decision has made. Let me give you a quick example. We're working with a school district in the Central Valley that began looking at solar last fall. They were able to get their interconnection application in by January 30th. We released the RFP at the beginning of February. We got bids last week. They got 5 bids on this project, but only 4 of the bids were able to say they could get the project built by the end of the year, in which case they wouldn't be able to get grandfathering. We need to provide a little bit smoother transition to this new TOU period so that schools don't get, and others don't have the hardship of losing out on their solar projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Andy Ferguson, then Ned Orritt.
Good morning. I'd like to address the central question of methane emissions as a greenhouse gas. I follow scientific literature very closely, and what's become apparent over the last few years is that the true effect of methane emissions is far higher than previous scientific estimates have pointed it out to be. Recent peer-reviewed scientific papers have indicated that the true methane radiative forcing from methane should be considered between 87 and 102 times that of CO2. This is really important because there's been a huge increase in methane emissions in the Northern Hemisphere since 2008. And recent scientific papers from Harvard, from the National Center of Climate Studies in Boulder and other institutions have shown that most of this increase has come about through oil and gas recovery, not through wetlands and not through other biogenic sources. Community choice aggregation offers a way to do fuel switching away from natural gas to modern heat pumps without having the problem of the inherent contradictions that exist in the IOU model. So I'd like to urge the Commission to please promote this type of fuel switching, support CPAs, and take down the three-pronged test that inhibits that fuel switching. Thank you.
Ned Orrit and Jeff Mathias.
Yes, I'm over here. Good morning, illustrious teammates. I say teammates because we're in this for a major thing. We created not we, but a few of us got together up here, what can we do when we realized our ecological footprint was at 5 planets, whatever, of our consumption in Sonoma County. What can we do to be responsible about that? That led to deciding that one of the first high leverage initiatives could be accelerating the production of clean energy. The Center for Climate Protection took that forward, ran with it, and now we have Sonoma Clean Power many years later. So little did we know then that the clean energy can also, with the new electric vehicles, Sonoma Clean Power is jumping on that. We can start to replace gasoline. And as Andy Ferguson just mentioned, we can also do a lot to replace natural gas, which has become more problematic over the years as its production methods has changed. So what we're looking for is we started with the big picture. I encourage you to hold that. Oh my goodness. Good luck. We're behind you. Thank you.
So Lisa Moscow, then Vicki Sievers.
I'm Jeff Mathias.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
I'm Jeff Mathias. I'm one of the owners of Synergy Solar. Here to talk about 2 things. One, CCAs. I think the bottom line on a CCA, it allows local programs. You know, PG&E has put programs out into our area that really are actually less efficient and more efficient. One thing I think Sonoma Clean Power has really done is the programs are targeted to Sonoma County, our environment, and our people. And I think when we look at a CCA, that was the original intent, is to allow local communities to do what they need to have done in their communities. And for that, I strongly support Sonoma Clean Power. The second topic is the protection of solar investment, which is dear to my heart as well. I mean, I'm asking customers, my biggest competitor in the industry is not my traditional competitors, but uncertainty. And the uncertainty comes in the issue of rate schedules, NEM, net energy metering, and the issues that are affecting us in terms of having a customer make a 20-year decision when they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I encourage you to please look at those issues every time you look at any issues related to rate schedule changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Lisa Moscow, then Vicki Sievers.
I have a list here of 100 comments that came through our next door in San Rafael, which is a neighborhood sort of Craigslist that has covers San Anselmo and that whole area. And I'm going to try to quickly go through some of these hundreds that I think are useful. From Greg Nell and Tara Linda, Representative Cutler from PG&E says that we're really there to help you. Well, he says, if you want to help us lower our rates instead of helping by emptying our pockets into their coffers with averaging payment plans, monitoring your usage so you see your earnings before being transferred to the stockholders, that would be help. Okay. There are 100 of these, so I've got to go to. Okay, PG&E is overcharging us as Ann Moore, Sun Valley customers. are paying for the bazillion dollars levied to them from the San Bruno disaster. Okay, Patty Vanderbrook, Gerstle Park, first time over $400, bills normally $183. My in-laws are not even home this winter, but their bill was strangely high. Everything was turned off. Here's somebody, I've experienced astronomical charges, both billing cycles.
Ms. Moscow, it might be helpful, because I think we get your point, if you shared the...
I don't think you got my point. I've got
If
like
you
about
could
10
share
or
your
20 more
written
points, and I was
comments
told that I was given
with-
2 minutes here. So I'd like to have another minute, please.
If you could just share your comments with our public advisor, Ms. Brown.
I know. I
then
want
we
to.
can-
I don't want
we
to. I
can
don't want to
move-
talk to your public advisor. I don't want to hear that kind of blah blah blah. I can't tell you how many blah blah blah. And the other thing is that I have been testifying about the smart meters for years at the CPUC. I know Mr. Peavy. He got $38 million in severance pay. The CPUC has salaries a little under $200,000 a year for not even having a 9-to-5 job.
Ma'am.
Corruption
Ma'am.
here is huge.
Ma'am,
And I'm going
I was going to ask you to share your written
I'm
materials.
sharing, I want to share it. I don't just want to share it to one of your representatives that's going to go blah, blah, blah. And I pretty much have said what I want to say.
I think you've had 2 minutes. There are other
I think
people who are
that
waiting to speak,
maybe
so.
I've had my 2 minutes now. Thank you.
Vicki Severs, please. Could we get a copy? Thank you. Vicki Severs?
Good morning. I'm affiliated with the EMF Safety Network and therefore in contact with close to 100 smart meter opt-out customers, many of whom have been conspicuously overcharged. Erroneously higher bills result from PG&E's practice of reading analog meters bi-monthly. 1 month the bill is estimated based on supposed previous usage. The next month the meter is read and the actual usage tried up. If usage is underestimated the previous month, it will be substantially higher the second month, which can place the usage in a higher tier at a higher cost. When this inaccuracy appears on bills, customers have no recourse but to call PG&E every time this occurs. And when customers do call, PG&E's suggested modes of rectifying the problem are inconsistent. There's clearly no efficient, effective policy in place. This sloppy business discriminates against opt-out customers who have already paid extortionate opt-out fees as well as undergone punishment since 2010 when we rightfully protested the never-mandated forced installation of wireless meters. Thank you.
Thank you. Aizadia? I hope I have this.
Good morning. My name is Isaiah. I live in Mill Valley. I have a printout here for you to look at on the therms of the gas readings from 2015 to present time. In present time, I also have one for the electric for present time readings. It's showing an overcharge just on the couple of readings that we've done. Okay? Do you understand? And I have the bills from present time to go along with this. I'd like you to look at it, if you don't mind. And I did file a formal complaint with the CPUC. The bills are so exorbitant that I complained to PG&E, and I also filed a complaint. I was told when I called, when I got a 15-day notice, that the bill was in dispute. I got another bill, and I was told it was in dispute. Then I got a 48-hour notice, and the power was going to be turned off the next morning if I didn't agree to a payment arrangement for the exorbitant rates. I want you to listen to us and do something. I understand Mr. Peavy got an exorbitant amount of money when he left the organization. That's not okay. That's our money. Thank you.
Ma'am, we don't generally allow
Who do I give these
disconnections
to?
when people are in a formal dispute.
Hello, I have a hearing loss. Can you
Okay, thank
please
you.
tell me who to give these to? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ann Hancock, then Woody Hastings.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to reiterate that we don't generally allow disconnections when people are in a formal dispute. So I want to actually have folks talk to the public advisor to make sure that there is no disconnection. So thank you.
Ann Hancock, Center for Climate Protection, and it's auspicious that you're here today. This was the place of the first formal vote for climate protection in December 2001 by the Santa Rosa City Council. And since then, as you know, we've had lots and lots of climate protection leadership here in Sonoma County. In 2005, the Center for Climate Protection said, how can we achieve our bold targets? And we identified community choice as the most powerful thing that we could do to bring down our greenhouse gas emissions. And we're delighted at the spread and the acceleration of community choice throughout California. And we have a request that to protect this innovative, game-changing platform, we need your help to create a level playing field for community choice in California. So thank you for being here, and thank you for helping to level the playing field for community choice.
Thank you. Woody Hastings and Paul Brophy.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Woody Hastings with the Center for Climate Protection. Thank you very much for being here. I spoke at the En banc in February and talked about the work that we are doing at the Clean Power Exchange supporting community choice development around the state. This map is the map that can be found at the Clean Power Exchange. I just handed it to your staff, so there's a copy for each of you. It illustrates the magnitude of the community choice movement, but it doesn't illustrate the quality of the work that these agencies are doing, and that can be found at the rest of the website where the map is housed, the many projects, programs, and policies at the 7 now operational community choice agencies that are helping to advance the clean energy economy. I urge you to consider the potential of community choice as a means to help lead the way in the energy transformation we're experiencing. I urge you to try to focus not so much on the snapshot at launch or the first couple of years of a community choice agency, but of the movie over time with that power of decision making in the hands of local decision makers and communities that can help advance the goals that the state that you are charged with advancing as well. Thank you.
Paul Brophy, then Jeff Cyphers.
Good morning, President Picker and Commissioners. My name is Paul Brophy. I live in Santa Rosa. I serve on the Sonoma Clean Power Community Advisory Committee, and I'm the immediate past president of the Geothermal Resources Council and serve on the board of the International Geothermal Association in Bochum, Germany. I'd like to make a few brief comments on Sonoma Clean Power and then link that to the role of geothermal energy in California's power mix. While building a very robust and solid financial business, Sonoma Clean Power has put together a balanced and diverse portfolio of renewable resources, which include local and out-of-state wind, local and in-state utility-grade solar, out-of-state carbon-free hydropower, and of course, local geothermal from the geysers up to 50 megawatts by 2018, and all with the use of almost no or minor RECs. One of the purposes in summary, I believe that a balanced and diverse portfolio proportionally similar to that procured by Sonoma Clean Power for the state, with a more focus on the best fit rather than least cost, is the way to resolve our state's current energy problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Cyphers, then June Brashears.
Well, welcome. Jeff Cyphers here. I want to thank the Commission for directing Sonoma Clean Power to work with Southern California Edison on preparing some recommendations on the power charge and difference adjustment. Those go in this week, and I want to follow up a bit. We know the investor-owned utilities are promoting something called the PAM, the Portfolio Allocation Method, and they briefed each of you. And I just want to raise a couple of concerns about that. One is that the proposal, as they've drafted it, would raise risks to California or to CCA customers by assigning costs, but without the ability to manage contracts. And the other key issue is it would require recalculating it and bringing it back and arguing before the commission every year forever. So the CCAs are working on an alternative to that, and I want to let you know that. We'll be back with more information soon, and looking forward to that conversation because I think we can get there. I'm actually feeling more optimistic now than I was at any time in the past. So thanks for your help on this.
Thank you. So June Brashears, then Alan Soul, I'm sorry.
Yes, good morning. I'm June Brashears. Welcome to Sonoma County. I'm a customer of our local Community Choice Energy program, Sonoma Clean Power, and I'm a very happy customer of the 100% local clean evergreen service that Sonoma Clean Power offers. I've found Sonoma Clean Power to be very responsive to our community. The meetings are great. I'm able to go to those and see that the community can engage with the agency. And I've seen them do great work with the electric vehicle community. I've been a beneficiary of their incentive program, and I appreciate that. And I especially appreciate the way Sonoma Clean Power is able to coordinate with our local agencies and move our community forward on our climate action plans so that we can really move forward in meeting our climate goals here locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Soul, then Barry Vesser.
Hi, I'm Alan Soule with the North Bay Electric Auto Association. I've driven an electric vehicle now for about 11 years, have over 100,000 miles on electric vehicles, and have driven across the country twice. I have a longer range vehicle, and around the world actually last summer. So I think I have a pretty good idea of what the upcoming demand's going to be for charging, and I highly recommend that you direct the charging programs that come before you to the fast charging along public motorways and in cities for that matter, and then lower charging levels in workplace and especially in multi-unit dwellings. Lower level charging in public areas is not going to be popular in the future with these longer range, lower cost electric vehicles coming out. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Vesser, then George Beeler.
Good morning. Barry Vesser from the Center for Climate Protection. I am a proud Sonoma Clean Power Evergreen customer, and I am very grateful that we have this option in our community. I want to start by thanking President Picker for making time in his schedule to join us to speak at the Business of Local Energy Symposium in Long Beach on May 5th. This is a gathering of community choice energy operators and emerging CCAs from around the state to talk about best practices. If you want to know more about that, please talk to me afterwards. A focus of the symposium this year will be on how can we accelerate the deployment of distributed energy resources and capture the benefits that they have to offer for local communities. We believe that DERs offer many benefits, many public benefits, significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions, new services for customers, potentially reduced rates, a more efficient and a stable grid. We salute what you've done with the DERP, and we hope that you will work with the CCAs to help accelerate deployment of DER. Thank you.
George Beeler, then Alan Horn.
Thank you for being here in Santa Rosa this morning. My name is George Beeler. I'm an architect. I've specialized in the frontier edge of green and energy efficiency for 40 years. I'm a member of the California Technical Forum. A speaker before mentioned the big picture. And through my whole life, I've seen making incremental changes forward to a goal that's not clearly defined. I really wish we could work backwards and look at what we need to do to confront climate change and stop using the economic tests that have gotten us in this trouble. Anthropologists are going to look back on us and say humans went extinct because it wasn't profitable to do anything about climate change. And I know you guys have a difficult job, but I really would appreciate you trying to look at the bigger picture. I strongly support you getting rid of the three-pronged tests that prevents fuel switching. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Horn, then Sandy Moore.
Thank you. My name is Alan Horn. I'm a member of the EMF Safety Network. PG&E is a criminal enterprise, and you need to treat them as such. PG&E is a convicted felon. PG&E is guilty of 5 or 6 different felonies. PG&E has killed or injured thousands of Californians. All of PG&E's top executives and management personnel needs to be arrested and put in prison for the rest of their miserable lives, just like we do with other mass murderers and mass felons. PG&E needs to be broken up into 1,000 pieces and scattered to the winds. The CPUC needs to ban all non-ionizing radiation-emitting devices such as smart meters in California because people are being killed and injured by them. I understand how deadly such devices are because I was trained by the military to kill people with both ionizing and non-ionizing radiation devices. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Moore, then Sandy Tate.
My name is Sandy Maurer. I'm the director of the EMF Safety Network. In February of 2015, after the decision and appeals were filed in the smart meter opt-out proceeding, 65,000 emails between PG&E and the CPUC were made public. These emails show the CPUC partnered with PG&E and marketing companies on the smart meter propaganda campaign. These emails show ex parte violations, including backdoor EMF science meeting with PG&E. These emails prove President Peevey knew smart meters could harm people. He wrote, quote, "There really are people who feel pain related to EMF," unquote. Even though he knew this, President Peevey assisted PG&E in concocting a pay to opt out of smart meter scheme. This is clearly unlawful. Furthermore, analog meter customers are now getting substantially higher bills because of bi-monthly meter reads and PG&E's faulty estimated billing system. Can you please inform me how to obtain justice on these issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Tate.
I'm Sandy Tate. I'm up here. I shrank a few inches because I'm old. I live in low-income senior housing in Sebastopol. More than 80% of us have signed a petition that we do not want the not-so-smart meters installed where we are. Our immune systems are not what they used to be. We're more susceptible to things that come along, allergies, radiation, and a lot of us are hypersensitive. I asked the CPUC to protect us like your literature says here. One of the things you do is consumer protection. Protect us from these smart meters. Pulse once in a while. They don't pulse once in a while or a few times a day. They pulse every few seconds, 24/7. Where I live, we have a bank of 12 meters on one side of the building. If we have radiation pouring into whoever lives within that apartment, they're going to be getting all that radiation. There are 200 of us that live on 16 acres. Please, no more smart meters. They're not smart.
Thank you. Jorge Rebagliati.
Good morning, can you hear me? Yeah, my name is Jorge Rebagliati. I'm the owner of Quest Green Technology Products and author of the petition California Governor Declare Climate Change a Major Disaster Before It's Too Late. I'm here to support community choice energy, but even more than that, I'm here to support and demand the transformation of all of California energy system to renewables. And even more than that, I'm here to support and demand that the government of California declares climate change a major disaster and make it a major priority, the major priority for the government action. California must act decisively, California must act massively, and must do it now. We must invest all our resources to restore the climate and to prepare for the climate change-related disasters to come. let's not fool ourselves. California is not safe from climate change. Just a few weeks ago, the Confluence of Climate Change Power and Atmospheric Rivers and insufficient infrastructure adaptation at the Oroville Dam was too close to killing 200 Californians and destroying several towns and thousands of acres. We cannot wait any longer to act.
Thank you. So that's the list of people who signed up beforehand to speak. Is there anybody else in the audience who did not sign up? Okay, please step forward and tell us your name and 1 minute.
My name is Bob Williamson. I'm a local resident and a Sonoma Clean Power ratepayer. I'm also on their community advisory committee, but all these comments are my own. They're not Sonoma Clean Powers, they're not the committees, they're not any other organizations, just mine. I've been watching the PCIA for a number of years now, and it's getting quite large and like almost growing up to 50% of generation, and that's a tremendous number, going to get even bigger when other CCAs come about. I understand and I agree with the basic philosophy to reimburse for bad legacy contracts in a regulated monopoly situation. But the point, from the public standpoint, of understanding something that is clear and logical, I believe that part has failed. And I'm not totally naive about this, but I think that myself and a bunch of other players, even some of them sophisticated, do not understand how the PCIA works. I know there's some work being done on it, and my point here is that for future credibility of you guys, this thing should be done so it is logical and clear to we, the folks that are going to have to pay for it.
Thank you. Sir?
Good morning. My name is Julian Gevra. I'm the Director of Sustainability with Jackson Family Wines. We're a Santa Rosa-based wine company with 1,500 employees and operations throughout the state of California. We've been a Sonoma Clean Power customer since it launched in May 2014 because we believe in their charter goals of providing a greener mix of energy while reducing greenhouse gas emissions at a competitive rate. We've seen our electricity bills decrease between 5% and 8% since we joined the program. In the wine industry, competition with our peers has been a net positive. It's pushed us harder to continually innovate, to increase our market share, and to work harder to produce a higher quality product. The presence of Sonoma Clean Power is resulting in a higher quality, more sustainable product that is helping California meet its climate goals. I urge you to continue your support of Sonoma Clean Power. One point that we would like to see improvement, and we need the CPUC's support and oversight here, is that PG&E has been unable to provide us with full cost electricity data electronically for our CCA accounts, and we would like to find a way for more integration with our CCA reports and our PG&E reports in an electronic format. Thank you.
I believe there's one other person who wanted to speak to us. Ma'am? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Susan Shannon. I'm one of the many victims of PG&E's recent rape. My PG&E bill in the winter has been around $160 at the highest. This year it went up to over $350 suddenly with no usage increase. I challenged PG&E and they gave me the usual rhetoric about analog meters being read every other month. They came out and did an investigation to no end. After that, I got a bill for $857. $857. I walk around in down jackets. I use very little electricity, no TV, no appliances, an oven maybe on once a week. I can't handle this. I have a petition here. 250 people in my neighborhood signed it. The same situation, a tripling of the bill. Something has to change. You're pushing us out.
Ma'am, could I ask you to share the petition with our executive director so that we can all get copies of it? Thank you. So is there anybody else who hasn't stepped forward to speak to us yet? Sir?
My name is Dan Lambert. I'm a solar energy sales consultant. One of the problems that I keep coming across is an option on the PG&E website which is supposed to allow the customer to determine what's the best rate for them. It's my understanding that in the CCA territories such as Marin and Sonoma counties, that this tool does not work for anyone. I can, however, call the Sonoma Clean Power representative that I work with, and she can get an analysis. I don't understand why this tool is not available for home users, and I'd like that corrected. I've been told that the reason that it wasn't corrected by one of the PG&E reps that I talked to at a Sonoma Clean Power meeting was that they did not have access to the rates of the CCAs, which to me is a totally bogus argument since these are public rates.
Thank you. Okay, one last time, is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the commission while during public comment? Okay, with that, I'll close the public comment session. I'm going to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. So we've had some agenda changes. Item 2 is withdrawn. Item 3 is held to the 27th of April. Item 5 is withdrawn. Item 7 is held till the 27th. Item 15 will come up with the regular agenda. Item 16 will be taken up on the 27th of April. Item 27 is being handled as discuss and hold, but will be acted on April 27th. Item 28 will come up on May 1st. Item 28 is also going to be taken up on the May 1st, and then item 30 will bring up with the consent agenda. So with that, we'll bring up the consent agenda. So, do I have a motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. Thank you. I'm going to turn the...
President, just to comment on one of the items.
Sure.
Thank you. Just in relation to some of the comments we've heard today and some of the previous comments on the bill increases over the winter, and I do want to reiterate President Picker's urging for you to submit your information to us, because we will take the time to analyze it and have our folks in both the Public Affairs Office and Energy Division really review it for ideas for improving the situation. And just wanted to note that one of the items, item 30 on the implementation of AB 793, is a small but effort from our staff to really look at the current situation in every decision that we make to try to improve this. And one of the directions that this decision includes is that the utilities will now have to report to us on how they're ensuring that they're making improvements on marketing and ensuring that highest disconnection customers are receiving these services. And these are all different types of technologies for energy efficiency improvements and management. They will have to, they're being directed to follow up with customers who complain about their bills, customers who are behind on their bills, customers who have been contacted about disconnections or have been placed on a level payment plan. And they are going to be offered which energy management technology solutions could help them with their bills and avoid disconnection. So this is certainly not a, solution to all the problems, but is a small piece of our effort to try to improve in every decision the situation for the highest impacted ratepayers. And I do want to thank the staff for hearing from the public and from these customers to try to improve our service to them.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to our executive director to introduce our safety and enforcement director, Elizaveta Malashenko.
Good morning, Commissioners. Elizaveta Malashenko will now make a presentation concerning the SMART program.
Hi, good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to give you a very short presentation on the Sonoma-Marin area rail transit, or SMART, and the role of the CPUC in assuring the safety of this new transit system. SMART is a passenger rail service and a bicycle pedestrian pathway project that's currently under construction. It's been in the works since 2002 when it was established by the legislature. When it's complete, it will serve a 70-mile corridor between Cloverdale in northern Sonoma County and Larkspur in Marin County. The capital cost was originally estimated at $500 million, and the funding sources include federal funding, state funding, regional, and various forms of local funding. The SMART rail system will be operating over an existing and rebuilt Northwestern Pacific Railroad right-of-way, and it's also being equipped with positive train control, or PTC. This is the map of the SMART rail system that shows you the route. It basically parallels US 101. And right now, SMART is getting ready to put the first segment into service that will connect San Rafael to Santa Rosa. It's roughly 43 miles long, and it has 43 at-grade crossings. And the cost of this project ended up being just under $500 million. The starting of revenue service has been delayed a few times. Right now, SMART is estimating sometime at the very end of spring, end of May. There's not a specific date as far as I know, but that's our operating assumption right now. From a jurisdictional point of view, we share jurisdiction with the Federal Railroad Administration over the SMART system. It's a little different from other transit systems of what you typically think of a transit system, that it falls under FRA regulation rather than FTA regulations. And that is due to the size of the engines, the DMU units. We in SCD, in the Safety and Enforcement Division, have been meeting with SMART on a regular basis for many years to keep tabs on the project, review things as they're constructing, and making sure that we are helping them be in compliance with the states and federal rules. We've also conducted numerous inspections, including inspections of crossings, track, signal and train control, railroad equipment, and the maintenance yard for these units. As parts of this project, there are a lot of existing crossings that are being upgraded. Here you see some photos of the crossings before the upgrades and the updates that were done below. So all of the crossings in the SMART corridor are being upgraded with signals, with cleaning up some of the visual aspects with the paints. And actually just this week, our engineer who is working on the crossings for the SMART corridor, Dave Stewart, has been doing an inspection of all of the 63 at-grade crossings that are in this segment. We've also received many applications for crossings. Several of those have been in front of the commission for a vote. We had 4 formal applications. Those are typically for new crossings or crossings that are being completely rebuilt. And then at the staff level, we process 88C applications. Those are applications for modification to existing crossings. And we had about 57 of those. And there's still a couple that are just being finalized at the staff level. One of the outstanding items right now is a couple of clearance issues that exist at the yard. I am not going to go into too much detail here because it's an open application in front of the commission and SCD has protested it. But the issues here are the clearances of the wash rack for the DMU units and the fueling station. Per GO 26D, the clearance is supposed to be 30 inches, and here the clearances are much smaller than that. So we've been working with SMART on this problem, and we'll continue to do so. The timeline is really coming up to when SMART will hopefully be operating. I know that a lot of people are really waiting in anticipation to have this option for their commute. From what we're going to be doing at the staff level is we have a full inspection tour of the entire segment for April 20th. So any of you commissioners, if you'd like to join us or have your staff join, you're welcome to do so. We'll also be working on any remaining issues that are still out there. There's just a couple of things on signaling and crossings and things like that that are still being worked out. The clearance issue in the yard that I was talking about. The commission and the commission staff does not actually have to do anything to allow SMART to begin revenue service. That's being handled by FRA, but we'll be working with FRA and making sure that any outstanding items are addressed before SMART starts operating. So with that, I will turn it over and see if you have any questions.
Thank you. I just wonder if you knew what the estimated cost would be to go from one end to the other.
I actually don't. I'm sorry.
Are you interested in taking over rate setting for rail again?
I'll find out and let you know. But I do know that they're going to use the Clipper card system, but I don't actually know how much the tickets are.
So I just want to say a few words of praise and a word of caution. And so having gone through the challenge of a local government building a light rail system, I understand the challenges and the difficulties of actually bringing it from conception to life. And so I want to commend the SMART leadership for actually having done a fairly good job. And there is specifically just point to the fact that this is exactly the kind of example of fuel switching that we all talk about, where we're actually displacing the use of petroleum fuels with clean electric fuels to actually help move people around. I also want to say that this is one of the first rail lines that's fully using positive train control, which is a very important tool for avoiding rolling accidents due to unattended or damaged rail rolling stock. And I think that that's very important because it shows that in California we're committed, even when the national trend seems to be walking back from the requirement of the positive train control in the freight industry. I will say, however, that I've talked a lot with our rail operations safety branch, and there's not anybody who doesn't work in that branch who isn't aware of the statistics about people getting killed, much less injured, due to rail vehicle collisions or pedestrian deaths. And so we have spent years working with the horror of what happened at San Bruno, where 8 people died. 50 people die every year due to rail incidents. 50 people every year. And most people don't know that. Most people don't think about it. But everybody who works for the Rail Operations Safety Branch has at least one incident in their work where they've had to account for the death of somebody who was trespassing or was caught in a vehicle on a track or who ran to try to get in front of a train. Increasingly, it's common that you'll find younger people especially who have earbuds on and don't hear the train coming up behind them. And so 63 grade level crossings is a risk in the community. And so my word of caution is that people here have both embraced the benefits of SMART, and they also have to understand the risk that they have chosen to bring into the community. I'll point to one crossing, which is I think has really caused us to think long and hard about grade crossings, the Jennings crossing, which is right next to the school, and increases the potential for these kinds of injuries and deaths. So my word of caution to people is at the same time that you celebrate this tremendous victory and all the hard work and the benefits that it brings to the community, do your best to educate everybody and to be vigilant about people who are not paying attention to the danger of train crossings. So thank you.
And thank you. I just want to make a follow-up comment about that, just to emphasize that the tension that the commission faces around meeting community needs, because as you noted, at-grade crossings can cause some safety concerns, but they're also desired by communities for the aesthetics. And there are other options. There are elevated crossings, and I've appreciated the regular briefings I've received from SCD regarding the number of at-grade versus elevated crossing requests we've received. And to your point, President Picker, it is a choice that a community has to make between sometimes the aesthetics and the safety, and one that we have to wrestle with as well.
Can I just ask a follow-up about the positive train control, which is very welcome? Is that being done voluntarily in advance of the schedule that the federal government is requiring? I know that's been an extremely controversial topic and that there have been many efforts to delay the actual implementation of positive train control technology, notwithstanding the clear benefits and safety impacts from it.
Yes, thank you for the question. This, to my knowledge, it is being done voluntarily by SMARTS. We do have a lot of systems with positive train control in California. So it is an area where we are leading in the country. And it's really been great to see the collaboration from the railroad and transit agencies here to be implementing positive train control in California. And I also want to thank commissioners for bringing up the issue of at-grade crossings. That is the biggest safety concern for SCD, in particular because there is an existing corridor and they do have freight trains on it right now, but they're very infrequent. They're usually just a couple in the evening and in the morning. And so there's a lot of habits of what we learned in SCD from the local community here to just be crossing more casually, not necessarily at designated crossings or just running across the track. And with SMART, there's going to be a substantial increase in traffic, especially during commuting hours. And we are concerned that people will be not really adjusted to the fact that these trains are going to be so much more frequent. So we really do urge the community to be very aware. And we're also looking, SMART is doing several outreach efforts in the community around railroad safety and through Operation Lifesaver, and trying to alert the community about this issue. And we're going to be looking for opportunities to partner them as well and do what we can to help in that effort. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So I'm going to remind commissioners in the audience of a couple of ex parte communications banned. And so items 20, sorry, I have to pull back so I can read. So items 28 and 28A in application 15-09-001 of the Pacific Gas and Electric Company's 2017 general rate case revenue requirement are being held pursuant to the Public Utilities Code Section 311E to May 11th, 2017 Commission meeting. The new ex parte ban is from April 27th through the voting meeting on May 11th, 2017. Parties are permitted ex parte communication from the conclusion of today's meeting, April 6, 2017 to midnight on April 26, 2017. And additionally, since we since we adopted item 15, I'm not going to read a ex parte ban on that item. So with that, I'm going to bring up our regular agenda. And the first item is item 15, and that's Commissioner Rechtschaffen's proceeding. Did we hold that item? Okay, sorry. But you wish to speak to it, to discuss and hold.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Appreciate it. This is an item, as we know, related to intervenor compensation in dispute because of its tardiness of arguably 1 minute or 8 minutes late after a 5 p.m. deadline filing. And I did want to thank the staff for the briefings that they provided on the potential slippery slope arguments and implications that it could have other beyond this particular decision. But after really sitting back and looking at the issue, I would prefer for us to vote no on this item today as presented and allow for the review of whether or not there was substantial contribution. And I do, again, want to thank staff of looking at some of the previous times we have made that decision to go back to the greater legislative intent of having these third parties participate in proceedings. And in those previous decisions, we've used what looks like 3 major principles. One, that the intent of the legislature is to encourage effective and efficient participation in ICOMP. Secondly, that the party make a good faith effort to comply. And thirdly, that it's unjust to deny compensation to an intervenor for years of substantive contributions in the proceedings where the only deficiency was filing their claim for intervenor compensation claim late. So with that previous precedent on principles and with the kind of overwhelming greater benefit of maintaining intervenor compensation participation, I would like to actually vote no today and ask that you consider that as well in order to provide staff the ability to review the merit of their contribution.
Excuse me. I want to express the same appreciation for staff in terms of providing us with a lot of information to understand this issue. But I have to say I have come to the opposite conclusion of Commissioner Guzman-Aceves. We do want to encourage participation in our processes, but we also have to recognize that we have very specific rules and requirements to facilitate that participation and to make sure that that participation is fair for everyone involved in the process. And so we do have a deadline, and it is true that we have waived the deadline in the past, but only where we were presented with information that clearly indicated that the intervenor made substantial efforts to meet the deadline, and that circumstances beyond their control caused them not to meet it. In this case, the party did not meet the deadline, and it was particularly concerning because this was a party that was involved in other proceedings where deadlines were an issue and was able to participate in some of the discussion around the fact that we do have a deadline, around the fact that there is a 60-day period of time to file the application, and waiting until the very last minute can result in not meeting the deadline and not receiving compensation. So for that reason, I would support the staff's recommendation to deny intervenor compensation.
Thank you both for your comments. This is indeed a difficult situation There are significant dollars on the line, and for an intervener that has been a helpful and active intervener, and I think it goes without question that we all hold the intervener compensation program in high regard, which is why this is a difficult question, right? Because you want to make sure that you have continued engagement, but you also want to make sure that the rules are equally applied and fair. As has been already noted, we've had a few opportunities over the last year or so to think about when a waiver is appropriate. And the commission has said in decisions, and some of us on the commission have opined in these meetings, a concern about using a waiver unless under extraordinary circumstances, because again, the rules have to be clear up front, and we expect interveners to be diligent in following those rules. As Commissioner Randolph noted, this is a seasoned intervener, which has previously had an intervener compensation denied for a late filing. So this is not new information to the intervener. Regarding your proposal, Commissioner, to vote no and have staff do further analysis, I am comfortable that staff has thoroughly analyzed this issue. I think whenever there's consideration of denial, my understanding and my experience has been staff goes back to look at that denial to really make sure that they looked at every issue. I would be happy to entertain an alternative to proposal to what's on the table if you wanted to hold and develop one. But given the option at this point between voting yes or no on this proceeding, on this proposed decision, I would support yes. But again, always happy to entertain an alternative argument if provided.
What do you mean by an alternative argument or an alternative proposal? What are you thinking about?
Well, the comments made by the commissioner are that she believes that there are circumstances in this case that warrant a waiver. Based on the discussions we've had with staff and our review of the what was filed, I do not see the circumstances for that justify a waiver. However, commissioners are always welcome to provide an alternative rationale. So these things somewhat in the details, right? So absent a proposal in front of me explaining why this situation warrants a waiver, it is hard for me to consider what that is. I don't have a proposal, which is why I think this is the right call, but I'm always happy to entertain one.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. As I understood Commissioner Guzman-Aceves' proposal, it was rather than to deny outright or to grant a waiver, it was to sort of remand to have the staff look at whether or not there was a substantial contribution on the merits and then come back and make a determination of whether or not a waiver should be granted in light of that additional consideration, since the proposed decision just says it wasn't timely filed and did not look to see whether or not there was a substantial contribution on the merits. But maybe I'm reading more into, or making more than a friendly amendment to what you had in mind. I don't know.
Did you want to go first? Oh, I was just going to respond to that. I mean, I do think that the deadline issue is determinative in this case, because once you do not meet the filing deadline, then you don't need to go to the next step of analyzing whether or not there's a substantial contribution. I mean, this is an active intervener, and I don't, my guess is they probably did make a substantial contribution, but unfortunately, they did not follow the timelines that we require interveners to follow.
And I think it's worth noting, we have timelines for various things. We have timelines for intervener filings, we have timelines for requests for rehearings, and there's timelines are there again to ensure equity, and so we want to make sure that we're being consistent with that application. And I think Commissioner Randolph's point is correct in terms of the order of review here.
I thank you, commissioners, and I definitely appreciate the equity with order and following of rules. I do think one of the things that is unique in these, what I've learned anyway, in these cases that is different from some of our other cases with strict timelines, for instance, up in the agenda later today, is the ability for us to request extensions. something that we do ourselves when we go to FERC. And that type of ability is not offered under ICOMP. Now, in earlier deliberations, we discussed, and I agree with the fact that I don't think we need to change the rules of the program at this time that govern ICOMP, but I think we need to weigh the fact that we don't have that ability to offer extensions in this current structure. And therefore, that weighs against our, the strictness of our applicability when there's overwhelming intent, from my perspective, taking, the perspective of what was submitted by the intervener, that they did intend to comply.
So I actually had this conversation in the past with the other commissioners, and so I'm going to hold with the determination that we made the last time we did this, which is that we did make an allowance, but we declared that our intent was to hold people to the deadline in the future, and so I intend to support Commissioner Randolph's arguments.
Well, this is a very difficult case. It illustrates the bromide that, hard facts make bad law, and it does seem, I'm very sympathetic to the argument that it seems extremely arbitrary to cut someone off after a 10-minute deadline, but I'm reluctantly going to go along with the proposed decision because we don't have a principled way of distinguishing this from, something that's filed an hour late or 2 hours late, absent good cause. And we should liberally interpret the good cause requirement. I think if there is a reason to justify missing a deadline, but from the record here, it doesn't look that way. I would be open to extending the period of time in which interveners can file to the end of the day. Right now, we define the day as 5 p.m. and people are filing electronically. We could certainly extend that to 12 midnight, although that's a double-edged sword also, since people will be filing at 11:59 and 12:01 as well. Or I'm opening to the suggestion that we provide the ability to request extensions on the 60-day statutory deadline as well.
I'll note, Commissioner, that we've had discussions of this nature in the Commissioner Committee meetings, and those would also be a forum to bring these proposals to again.
Commissioner, are you moving your item?
Yes.
Okay. Could the clerk please call the roll?
For item 15, Commissioner Guzman Aceves?
No.
Commissioner Peterman?
Yes.
Commissioner Randolph?
Yes.
Commissioner Rexheffen?
Yes.
President Picker?
Yes. So the item carries. Next item up is item 27. This is the discuss and hold. And I think that Commissioner Guzman Aceves called for the
Yes.
discuss and hold. So
Thank you.
do you want to kick it off, or do you want to actually outline them? Okay.
Okay, thank you. I requested a discussion on this item that was proposed to be held to give an opportunity to really share some thoughts on this overall and very important issue on energy storage. I do want to thank the staff on the briefing they provided on where things are to date, and wanted to just stress as we move forward, especially in light of the hold, for consideration of a couple of measures that I think really help frame our overall programs on all of the energy storage issues. One particular recommendation that I will make here, and also in a later implementation of one of the elements that's utilized to meet these storage goals, is the consideration of a set-aside for disadvantaged communities. And just as a point of example, as many of you know, I inherited one of the proceedings having to do with communities in the San Joaquin Valley that lack access to natural gas. And in some cases, some of these communities have the opportunity to not just fuel switch, but never have to depend on natural gas. And in these instances, it seems to be an optimization of where we could have this distributed energy model that we've seen throughout the state with schools in particular and other community-based assets to develop energy storage as well as other forms of distributed generation and really help keep these communities off of natural gas. This is an area that needs a lot of innovation for communities that lack a lot of capacity and social infrastructure to do these types of forward-thinking energy supplies. I also have the privilege of working with Commissioner Randolph on resource adequacy as well as demand response. And in those areas, one of the things that I've learned is a lot of these investments, both in storage and demand response and other distributed sources, are not fully being accounted for in our resource adequacy. And I look to this PD to really providing that, that leadership and focus that our resources are in fact providing that local RA benefit. And certainly there is some synergy with that purpose as well as investing in disadvantaged communities. Not in all cases, but in a lot. So I really look forward to working with staff and with Commissioner Peterman on hopefully making this PD include some of the equity principles that have been in most of our recent legislation, including the most recent guidance from the legislature in SB 350.
I have a similar suggestion or comment, which is I'd like to see us provide a set-aside for disadvantaged communities. AB 2868 expresses a priority for the public sector and low-income investment, but it doesn't have an explicit set-aside, and especially for front-of-the-meter systems, I'd like to see us do that since it's not as obvious we get those benefits without a set-aside, and maybe we focus on grid-constrained areas or something similar to what we've done in response to Aliso Canyon, where a lot of those areas are disadvantaged communities anyway and provide a lot of grid benefits. They can offset the need for peaker plants, and I think that's a direction I'd like to see us go with the proceeding.
Well, thank you for your comments. I appreciate the opportunity to hear them. And it's the first time I've actually had an opportunity to hear my colleagues' concerns or interest in this area. So appreciate the opportunity to offer a few comments now.
I was also going to make a few comments if you don't mind holding.
No, go.
I'm generally finding that set-asides are less effective in actually addressing our goals, and so I tend to discount them as being a solution to any real policy goal. They tend to be artificially constraining. We haven't really done very well with them. I'll give the example of set-asides for multifamily housing energy efficiency. For a variety of reasons, these are efforts to try to force a series of choices at a high level, and it's a centralized approach. It doesn't actually address real needs frequently, and it tries to force actions that sometimes are infeasible. I think that when I see these, I question whether people actually have thought it through well and actually are truly addressing needs very well. I prefer to actually consider this in terms of preferences, which would allow people to actually figure out that, to ensure that they are considering all of the best opportunities, and then they can address them flexibly. But a hard set aside just doesn't make sense. Sorry.
I'll just note that I see your point. However, in this situation and other situations, I think that it would be really beneficial to think about some of the issues raised by my fellow commissioners about ways to consider different ways of structuring the set-asides in a manner that we hope would be effective and address some of the challenges in terms of locational benefits and things like that. And so having that requirement up front kind of forces us to carefully analyze it and carefully consider what the options are. And so I think it's an intriguing opportunity in this proceeding, and I'm interested to hear Commissioner Peterman's comments.
Thank you. Well, first, let me say overall, I appreciate the discussion we're having about the need to look at all of our different programs and procurement from different customer perspectives and making sure that we're including all Californians in the clean energy future. I have a couple, that being said, I want to pick up on something President Picker, I think, was alluding to, which is one size doesn't fit all for addressing a concern. And a set-aside is not necessarily the best option for every type of procurement that we do. And indeed, we've had experience as a commission with doing set-asides and then seeing programs untapped because the barriers are beyond simply offering a procurement opportunity. There are other barriers that impede people accessing resources. So I wanted to say something about energy storage generally and why I am reticent to think about a set-aside in this immediate circumstance. One is that we have designed a framework to broadly be focused on the fact that storage can provide different system benefits, and many of those benefits don't accrue or not accrue to a particular customer class. So for example, when you invest in energy storage as a distribution deferral, that's not a benefit that only goes to a rich community or a northern community or a low-income community. It's spread across different customer classes. And the more you think about set-asides, then the less opportunity and bandwidth you have in the targets to actually be focused on the need for the storage for reliability purposes within the system. So then that begs the question of, well, what are some aspects of storage that do have some customer-specific attributes or benefits? So one area could be on bill management, helping customers in disadvantaged communities use energy storage to offset higher bills. That procurement is done through SCHIP. So I'm going to get here a little bit about what are the procedural homes for these questions, which I don't think are this storage track 2 proceeding. So the SCHIP proceeding is where we incentivize the customer side storage that leads to bill management. Another area which you identified, Commissioner Guzman-Aceves, is on deferral or of natural gas generation. We saw this with Lisseau Canyon. We had successful procurement of 65 megawatts to offset the decline in gas generation we expected to see from the shutdown of Lisseau Canyon. That procurement is an area, again, where you could see some advantages of disadvantaged communities because you're shutting down or not using gas plants in certain areas. That procurement, though, was developed as a part of the LCR need. So that becomes an issue that comes up in LTPP, IRP, RA, again, not in the storage procurement. It's worth noting that over half of our storage procurement, since we passed these targets in 2013, came from procurement that happened outside of these targets that we're talking about here. So I think these are good questions, but we need to really identify what are the proceedings where you would address them. Additionally, with AB 2868, there's specific direction to think about storage in public sectors and low income. We don't have a consistent definition for how to do that yet. What the PD proposes is that in 2017, we're having these encouraging informal discussions between the utilities that are implementing these programs and stakeholders to start coming up with some of these definitions, which could be used in further proceedings. At some point, we will have the 2018 procurement plans will come to us as a commission for approval. Those are the plans that will specifically direct the procurement related to AB 2868, where the question of definition of low income and how we apply that will come up. And then finally, I want to say about this proceeding here, the issue of disadvantaged communities, a set-aside, is not scoped into this proceeding. We do not have a record development on it, and so therefore I do not think it appropriate to think about a set-aside in this case. I'll also note that we've declined in this. What was in scope was thinking about whether to increase the targets. For various reasons, we propose that we do not increase them at this time. We have an evaluation that's coming up. There's procurement that's been ordered elsewhere. And even within the IRP, there's work happening on definition around disadvantaged communities and how that applies to procurement. So as much as we want to see us successfully develop energy storage, I think this PD moves in the right direction by showing some restraint, frankly, to make sure that we are addressing some of these definitional need issues before just blindly ordering procurement. Because one of the implications, too, for disadvantaged communities, just to wrap up, are the rate impacts. All of these procurements ultimately get to the bottom line of rates, whether we think they're for good purposes or not. So I am reticent to add additional constraints and costs to the system that ultimately will affect disadvantaged customers just as much as our choices about where the procurement will be. So Commissioners, I'll say I'm not inclined to change the PD at this point on this issue, but am open to continuing this discussion as a part of the discussion around storage that we're going to be collectively having.
Just, you may have more to discuss. I just want to ask you just a procedural question. The procurement that occurs through SCHIP or LTPP or IRP can count toward the 2514 procurement mandate, right? Is that correct? Okay, so to the extent that there is, some of those programs are geared and do have disadvantaged communities set-asides or preferences for whatever that can carry into whatever goals are set for this proceeding.
SCHIP doesn't generally mandate procurement. It actually targets the support to actually ease the procurement.
Right, but to the extent that procurement is carried out, that can satisfy the requirements of this program as well.
Yes, and just to, I think, put a finer point on what you're saying, the underlying programs that feed into counting to the storage target have their own set of requirements and rules. So if a project is funded through SCHIP, it has to meet all those requirements, and then it has to meet the requirements of the storage framework, which are less. I mean, the idea, again, when we set out to create this framework, it was created in a way to be flexible and not have so many constraints as to be overly binding. And so to the extent that one of those other programs put a requirement in, then that would affect the amount of storage that's coming from that program that's satisfied to meet the target. But I think these are important questions, but I really do want us to be very thoughtful and deliberate of our analysis here, because there's not a one-size-fits-all model.
So I'm just going to break in for a plain English translation. SCHIP is the Small Generator Incentive Program. It's a pool of money that helps to finance energy resources that are subject to a couple of other programs, including energy storage. LTPP is a long-term procurement program, which is where we actually set both the energy targets and start to break down into a list of resources what's really required to keep the grid functional. Resource adequacy is a year-by-year assessment of whether we actually have the resources available that will both provide the energy but also the other ancillary services that we need to keep the grid operating at 60 cycles and avoid voltage collapse and blackouts. So, did I miss any?
And I will say, I welcome your feedback now. I would like to see this item go at the next meeting. We have a lot of work that's happening in the energy storage proceedings, as you all are aware, and I want to be able to be responsive to your comments. This is a quasi-ledge proceeding, so the responsibility lies with my office with the coordination with the judge on what ultimately, any revisions that happen, and so it would be good to hear your thoughts based on my responses.
Thank you, and I would certainly acknowledge that each of these programs has a unique approach, and set aside is not necessarily the best approach for every one of these programs. But I do think I would fundamentally disagree that trying or attempting to address equity at the same time that we're trying to promote the growth of storage are necessarily inherently a customer cost. And I think there is a lot, particularly in the storage realm, that is very uniquely customer benefit and therefore kind of blind to the overarching impact to the customer base, whether that customer benefit is a school or whether it's Walmart. You know, and if we could be more intentional about that equity, then it doesn't, has the same impact to the overall rate base. So I think we can do both. And I would very much take you up on the challenge to try to get to a place quickly to outline that equity without violating the overarching goal of the entire PD.
I'll note, and I think you're kind of highlighting on this transition that's happening, which is the overwhelming majority of procurement directed under this is distribution level and transmission level. So when we talk about, this is not the Walmart having a storage unit on its roof. That is the customer side of this program, which initially was scoped relatively small because there wasn't a tremendous amount of interest in that. We've seen a real growth in that area, and particularly we're going to see more of that with the increased funding in SCHIP that we'll be talking about later, and the legislative direction under AB 2868. So I appreciate there may be different issues we need to look at the more these storage resources are put on the customer side of the meter. I do want to go back to why did we create the storage targets in the first place, right? There was a need that we identified. We have aggressive renewable energy goals. We're seeing a tremendous amount of success of energy we put on the system, which is being underutilized. So storage allows us to utilize that renewable energy better. It's a complement to helping us reach our goals. I want us to be mindful of that role, that we really need to be a flexible resource and not make it an end unto itself. Storage is not an end unto itself. And if we're not careful, if we took too many constraints, too many carve-outs, it's going to become a problem for us again in terms of the cost impact. And so I think that I really want to make sure, again, we're distinguishing about the type of storage, because end-use benefits, yes, but when we're talking, there's actually the customer benefits are widely distributed when we're talking about the majority of storage. And I would challenge the premise that it's not equitable at this point. I think that's a question. So that's a question we look at, but I don't think we jump to a conclusion about that initially. So that's a question I think we can talk about. There are going to be opportunities and evaluation coming up. And really, again, I would like us to be consistent in how we're thinking about these principles. I appreciate your point. What are our principles around this issue? And I welcome discussions about how we articulate those principles through IRP or some other mechanisms versus doing them in this siloed program, which I think is unique amongst siloed programs.
I just want to have, switching topics for 1 second, on the power to gas discussion, I know the decision retains the prior rulings that it's not eligible, and I don't disagree with that, but I just want to note that it's interesting and emerging technology, especially when we're utilizing our abundant supply of excess renewables to convert to renewable gas for transportation or power and reduce GHG. So I'm hoping we can tackle that in other contexts and other proceedings, but I don't disagree with the proposed decision's resolution of that issue.
I just say I think that's really interesting as well. There was some pilot work that's happening with SoCalGas, so it'll be interesting to get an update on the status of that project, what they're planning to learn from it, and how we bring that back into our procurement cycle consideration. Just the couple things to think about with power to gas. I mean, one is, what is the end use? If the end use is transportation, that's a little bit different than what historically we have supported. And it's also, from what I understand, the big challenge is the high cost of electricity. But there are other industries for which we have high costs, a lot of electricity use, like desalination, which have public purposes as well. And so if the question is, how do we provide lower cost energy for important end uses, let's have that conversation broadly, and it's not exclusive to power to gas. But I'd really be interested in finding what the right forum for that is as well.
I just wanted to point out how much everything is connected to everything. So the need to actually think about people who've been left aside in considerations of our energy resources, or people who feel like they don't have the same basis for competing to get access to those resources, is really a point here, but probably not best addressed here. And I think similarly, I have a different view on power to gas, and I'm not sure that it's really ripe as a storage technology. I think it's probably worth setting up some way to actually examine that, but again, probably not here. So the question is, how do we actually maintain some consistency across our many different decision-making processes? And how do we actually ensure that we don't lose track of these things has always been a big problem for us. So one of the things is that the commissioner committees do provide a place where we can explore this when we don't have a decision in front of us, and be much broader on where we have those conversations. I'll also say that this is exactly the kind of problem that our former colleague, Commissioner Florio, and I had when we were looking at both the question of distributed energy resources and all the tariffs that applied to all these different technologies, because those are split into different proceedings. So we actually created in public a roadmap just so that everybody could see transparently where in which proceeding we actually were trying to bring these things up and how the discussion would play out over time, so that as we evolved principles, which we actually tried to do in that roadmap, the action plan, it began to be applicable. It doesn't close out the prerogative of any commissioner, assigned commissioner and the judge to actually tailor the scoping of a proceeding, but it helps us to figure out where the heck we're going. And I think that's our challenge here.
Just wanted to raise, since we're talking about storage, just two other points of interest. We are going to be continuing our work on multi-use applications for energy storage over the next several months. And that will be a real opportunity to assess some of those benefits to end-use customers. Customer side storage can have the ability to provide grid services, but also customer benefits. But all of those opportunities can't be monetized right now. So we're doing joint work with ISO over the next several months. So I think that will shed light on those issues, which will be positive. And then I'll just finally say I appreciate the comments raised today. I think these are important issues. When we eventually vote on this, if my colleagues want to file concurrences that highlight the importance of these issues, that's always good for preservation of a record and good direction and thought going forward.
Okay, so this will come back to us on a future agenda for action.
So Commissioner Peterman, you were planning on bringing it back next meeting, is that correct?
I am, and at this point, we've made some changes based on comments. Let me say thank you, stakeholders, for your careful read. It's been very helpful to get clarification on, we made some mistakes in terms of the explanation around AB 2868. A lot of active stakeholder engagement in this, thank you. So I'm planning to bring it back and not expecting to make any substantive changes at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to just remind everybody that we have to be out of this room at 12:30 so they can refigure it for community business. And so just remind everybody to keep an eye on the time. Next item is item 29. Again, that's Commissioner Rechtschaffen.
This is the self-generation incentive program that we've already talked about a little bit. This was a program established during the midst of the energy crisis to create a source of self-generating, self-sufficient energy sources for distributed generation customers. It's a very aptly named program, self-generation. It's been updated, amended by the legislature a number of times, by the commission several times. Most recently, last year, the legislature authorized a significant expansion of the budget. I would just want to point out Sonoma County's been a robust participant. They've over close to $50 million in incentives have gone to customers here, and there have been over 80 SCHIP projects, including 15 storage projects. So thank you for your participation in the program. Today's decision is relatively limited in scope. We are proposing to double the budget through implementation of AB 1637, which was passed last year. Also make a change in the methodology used to calculate the incentives provided to systems that also get an investment tax credit and under federal law, and that's in response to a petition for modification. So I think the important thing is we want to get the program up and running. It's been on hold for a year. There's a lot of pent-up demand. There are a lot of customers anxious to realize the benefits of the program, and we want to get it moving, and we plan to open up May 1st. The commission, led by President Picker, did a lot of very hard work last year on an extensive program design, trying to align the program around 3 central goals: reducing greenhouse gas emissions, providing support for the grid, and transforming the market and we want to give those programs, we want to give those changes a chance to work. The decision does express our intent to reserve a portion of the program, a portion of the budget for disadvantaged communities. We want to ensure that a portion of those funds are available. I don't view this as a carve-out, really just making sure that the money goes to those communities. I'm not suggesting that there's a problem. It may be the case that we're doing that already, but we want to make sure, and I think that's the right policy that we want to work to going forward. We don't have the details spelled out in this decision, but that's something we'll work on. I think the parties all recognize that the real place where market transformation occurs are in the middle steps of the incentive program, steps 2 through 4, and that's where the decision places all of the new funds. Step 1 is seen as, you know, a little bit over generous given where the market is right now. Step 5, probably the incentives are too low to trigger any kind of market transformation. So the funds are placed in steps 2 to 5. The decision allocates 85% of the funds to storage projects, 15% to renewable generation projects, consistent with the other programmatic changes that really make it much more difficult for fuel cells to participate. That's our estimate of where the demand will be. And of the 85% of the projects that are going to storage, there's a carve-out of 10% for residential storage systems less than 10 kilowatts. The program administrators are given flexibility to change that number if appropriate. We've heard from concern from standalone storage companies that the priority for systems paired with solar are going to severely limit their participation in the market. And they filed a motion earlier this week asking us to open up an investigation to look at program registration before we launch and then to implement a significant pause after the first step to see if we can develop a priority for projects that promote grid services, which of course is a very laudable goal. My priority is to get the program launched, get it up and running. There's a lot of pent-up demand, as I said. I'm not really sure that we'll learn enough just from the step 1 auction. There's not that much money in step 1. It's just money left over from before the new money authorized by the last year's legislation. It's about $30 million or $34 million as compared to almost over $90 million for step 2. So I'm not sure we'll learn that much from just the step 1 auction. And I'm reluctant at this point to recommend that we make any significant programmatic changes given what we've already done over the past year. Having said that, I'll be interested in hearing from the other commissioners if you have questions about the proposed decision or the comments of the parties, or if you think there's some specific data that we could get from the first auction, the first step 1 auction, that might make you more inclined to go along with programmatic changes, or where you think we should go going forward. So with that, I ask for your support for the proposed decision.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think this is a well-reasoned decision, and I'm supportive. On the last issue, I do appreciate the concerns from the joint storage parties regarding the need to have a diversity of projects incentivized under SCHIP, and therefore can appreciate the possible concern regarding the solar storage occupying most of the megawatts. That being said, I wish this issue was raised and addressed in response to the December 2016 assigned commissioner ruling. I appreciate at this point your intent to get the program going, and I'm supportive of that. So I would just say that I think this is worth monitoring, and I would be supportive if there is a problem that's identified after step 1 or in the future, that as the assigned commissioner, you initiate a motion or something to either evaluate the prioritization, the lottery prioritization, or even consider holding future funds until certain issues are resolved.
I will just say I'm supportive of the decision. I appreciate the modifications to address the question of taking a look at opportunities in disadvantaged communities. And like Commissioner Peterman, I don't see the need to sort of say at the outset that there should be a pause to address the issue related to the types of projects. I recommend to you and to staff that you kind of keep an eye on that and think about opportunities to take a look at it that wouldn't necessarily slow down the implementations of steps 2, 3, and 4.
Well, this is similar to my last comments on the previous discussion on storage. And in this situation where it is a much more directed incentive program to customers, I do think it's appropriate to consider a set aside of some sort. I also agree with the importance of, I've been briefed by staff and others on the importance of getting the program going, so I am supportive of that. But would like to understand what your timeline is for getting the consideration of disadvantaged communities addressed. And I would have preferred to see it before step 2, but also in hearing from our energy division and other staff that it probably is more appropriate to happen after step 2. And I just wanted to see if you concurred with that timeline.
I'm not positive we know the timeline, but our intent is to move very quickly and to have a staff proposal for what criteria would be used for a disadvantaged communities incentive program or set aside whatever. I don't know that it can be done before step 2, but we'll work as quickly as we can. I think we can do it pretty quickly.
I'll be supporting the proceeding as drafted. I think that it's like every SGIP proceeding. It corrects the mistakes and the gaming of the previous proposal, and I think you did a pretty good job of trying to get something in shape to advance us. I don't think that it'll ever be a perfect program. Every time you put a big pot of money on the program, a big pot of money on the table, a lot of people come around and the elbows start flying. Okay. Do we need to call the roll? We did not.
For item 29, Commissioner Guzman Aceves.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterman.
Aye.
Commissioner Randall.
Yes.
Commissioner Rescheffen.
Aye.
President Picker.
Aye. This motion carries. So now we move on to item 31. Commissioner Rechtschaffen again.
I don't have are you Pete? Great. Go for it.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item 31 on today's agenda would, I probably don't even need the deck for this. There's one slide. Would approve PG&E's power purchase agreement with Wheelabrator Biomass Facility. This PPA is the latest in a series of biomass contracts that were ordered by the Commission in response to implementing both the Governor's 2015 emergency proclamation and Senate Bill 859 addressing the tree mortality crisis. The resolution approves PG&E's advice letter 4984E for 34 megawatts of biomass capacity scheduled to commence December 1st, 2017. This procurement fulfills PG&E's total 63 megawatt of biomass capacity required under the emergency order in SB 859. In addition, the resolution approves a price extension amendment that allows the facility to be seamlessly staffed and operable to and through the contract start date later this year. The contract terms conform with SB 859's requirement that fuel stock be derived from 80% sustainably managed forests and 60% of the stock coming from designated high hazard zones. Finally, because of the short procurement time frame required by the law, PG&E utilized a bilateral contracting process to negotiate this PPA.
Commissioners? I'll just note that I'm supporting this action. I think that it's another example of the challenges of carve-outs and people assuming that a carve-out is actually a process that will deliver a project no matter what. Most of the projects that we've approved are actually associated with existing forestry management, as rather than being what I think most people assumed the biomass program would look like, which is harvesting bark beetle damaged woods. The projects that have been successful and affordable tend to be lumped towards those who actually have some existing indigenous power purchase, and where they actually have an existing sustainable forestry program that's already in the mountains and active in forest lands, can bring in lumber and can actually defray all the costs. So again, I think that it's a useful project. I'm going to support it. I think that we've seen a lump not to where the greatest fire hazard is, however, but far more to where there's existing forestry practices.
I'll be supporting this item, and I want to thank Energy Division staff for your work on this, and approval of this contract will result in the IRUs having exceeded the procurement goal by signing over 150 megawatts of biomass contracts, and I am pleased to support it. Thank you very much.
I'll be supporting it.
Great. Okay. So I think I sense the mood of the commission. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
This motion carries. And now we're on to item 32. Director Amato is going to present.
Good morning, Commissioners. Through this proposed resolution, the Communications Division seeks your approval today to grant the Southern Border Broadband Consortia project, which would be about $450,000 over a 3-year period, to promote broadband deployment and adoption efforts in San Diego and Imperial counties. Let me use some background. In 2010, the state legislation established a rural and urban regional broadband consortium grant account that is codified under Section 281 of the Public Utilities Code. Monies in the consortia grant account are to be set aside for grants to eligible consortia applicants to fund the cost of broadband deployment activities other than the capital cost of construction of facilities. To implement the statute, the Commission established a consortia eligibility criteria and application process in Decision 11-06-038, which included an evaluation of the applicant's work and action plans, budgets, experience, and endorsements. Since last summer, the Commission has approved 16 consortia grant applications covering 52 counties in California. We have not approved a consortia organization for San Diego and Imperial counties at this time. In October 2016, Southern Border Broadband Consortia submitted an application to cover San Diego and Imperial counties. The Southern Border Broadband Consortia would be a new consortia applicant for our group. Let me change the next slide. The next slide shows basically that CD is the California Advanced Services Fund program staff has reviewed the proposal and found it to be eligible for a grant award. Among the applicant's work plans summarized in Appendix A are the various tasks that are listed on the screen. Moreover, staff has found that the budget is reasonable and that the Southern Border Broadband Consortia has experience with broadband deployment and adoption efforts. With regard to endorsements, CD received 40 endorsements from healthcare organizations, educators, nonprofits, and local businesses. In addition, we received 9 endorsements from city organizations in the 2 counties. The proposed resolution includes various standard compliance requirements for a consortia grant, including quarterly progress reports as a condition for payment, and a notice that the applicant may be subject to audit at any time. So with that, the Communication Division here submits the proposed resolution and asks for your support. And if there's any questions, let me know.
So I have a couple questions. I guess one issue I see is that the CSF consortium program, it really has an absence of measurable outcomes, and that's particularly evident in this consortium's work plan. The work plan attached to the consortium resolution lists activities that they propose to perform, such as research and compile data to improve maps. And so this seems to me to be somewhat vague in nature. Now, I'm just going to remind the commissioners that the State Controller's Office's audit completed in last month, in March of 2017, covering the years 2010 to 2015, those consortium that did receive CASF funds didn't have any performance standards because we didn't develop minimum standards to evaluate success or failure or to measure performance. So the audit very specifically found the program requirements not found in the PUC or in the resolutions. And then they stated the requirements are so broad that detrimental results could have to exist before one can conclude that the program is not being implemented properly. So they suggested that we develop more specific standard and guidelines for the entire CASF program.
Commissioner, if I can interject on that point, the project does have standards or performance metrics for the applicant to perform regarding training or outreach or development, things that they're going to be doing. I think what the auditor was, or state controller auditor was referring to more is the overall 98% goal. There's a kind of a lack of a linkage between that, what the consortia members are doing, and getting to that 98% goal. And that is a challenge that we need to work on. And staff has talked about maybe advancing some reforms to get to that. But in terms of this project itself, there are performance metrics that the applicant is bound to follow, and that's what we will be monitoring in the quarterly progress reports that they submit.
So I'm not so clear that I've seen that in some of the other consortium issues that have come up. So I'm going to support this contingent on addressing it in the newly reopened CASF proceeding. I understand legislation is going to require us to reopen that. I think we're going to have to really be clearer about our expectations, and I don't think it's just about training and other expectations. I think it has to be measurable outcomes, as you point out, that actually drive us towards a specific goal. I've talked with your staff about the different ways that people choose to actually measure the compliance with the 98% goal, and I think we have to also clarify that. I want to just kind of come back to something I raised earlier to you, which is Desert Shores and Rancho Santa Fe areas are high priority. These are wealthy communities who, if they actually really significantly had interest in high-speed broadband have a variety of tools that are at their disposal as opposed to disadvantaged communities who might otherwise not get access to broadband services. So I'm just still trying to figure out why we prioritize them, except as to whether it's just this broad goal of having everybody reach it. My concern is if these are communities who have the economic resources to be able to find solutions, are they likely to actually subscribe and to make economic the projects since they have other options? I'm just trying to understand why we picked them.
Well, these areas were identified in this white paper as areas that have reasonably higher population centers that do have low broadband or no broadband type of situations. So we're trying to get to that 98%, and we're trying to identify how can we get there by hitting larger populations. It's kind of the bang for the buck type of approach. But we've identified about 13 areas in the preliminary analysis. Now, we've done a workshop, we've taken feedback from that, and we need to kind of get to the next steps. But we have identified areas that if we can fund those, it'll make a step towards that 98%. We won't quite get there, but it'll be closer to that. It might be a rounding error. Right now, we're reporting from a combined technology point of view that we're about 97.6% reliable broadband in the state. So we're just about close to that 98%.
And running out of money.
Excuse me?
And running out of money.
The money is coming down, but we still have $60 million in my, what I understand.
So I'm just going to say that when we do come back to look at performance metrics, I'd like to actually have better metrics around adoption as opposed to just simple access as we target remaining funds.
Staff will be happy to work with you on that.
Yeah. And one issue that come up is similar to the issue that we raised in the choice of undergrounding in Morgan Hill as opposed to using the power lines. And some of the consortium members have stated that they've worked with utilities to use broadband over power lines, which is a method of power line communications for relatively high-speed digital data transmission over the public electric power distribution wiring. I'm just curious as to how do we factor that into the process? What are the issues? I've heard about this in the distant past. I have not seen much on it. I'm curious to understand more about it and potentially raise that as well as the opportunity in the reopened CASF proceeding.
Broadband over the power lines is a concept out there, and it might be something that we could take advantage of going forward. But at this point, there hasn't been a whole lot on using that type of technology. It's not quite the favored approach to things.
Okay, well, so those are some items to consider.
That would be something to consider in an OIR going forward. Yes, it is, Commissioner.
Staff, I hope will take my comments to heart and bring those up there for comment and examination.
Just to go back to the project, can you clarify the role of San Diego? Because the project is primarily in the Imperial Valley, correct?
Well, it's centered there, but it's going to also include San Diego. The San Diego County is on board for the project, and there's been letters of support from San Diego as well. It's the two counties.
Okay.
I'll just note, I think one of the concerns commissioners have had in approving various CASF grants has been whether there's going to be the uptake of the use of the infrastructure. And from what I understand, one of the values of the consortium is that these people are the ones, the eyes and the ears on the ground, that are actually able to get a good assessment or assist any applicant with getting an assessment of what the demand is. So there can be some value there. I appreciate, it's really great to hear that there is going to be an opening up of the proceeding, because some of the issues we've talked about over the last several months really are more systematic about the program, and I've felt uncomfortable denying projects that are meet our rules, but we just rather have different rules. And so it's a good opportunity, if it's reauthorized, the money's extended, to look at what things we'd like to see changed. I completely support the idea of thinking about appropriate metrics for the consortium, but I think a part of that discussion has to be that there are some certain things that you can't have great metrics for. So if there's a concern around some of those, then maybe you limit the amount of money that can go to those activities. But there are relationship building activities that these consortium do that I do think are important for making sure we have adoption. And so let's look at all the different things they're asking to do and see if we can come up with the right metrics, but also acknowledge when a metric might not fit. So I look forward to participating in that discussion.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, one of the concerns we've talked about in the past with these projects is how do we get the actual projects, right? How do you get folks to come in and say, okay, here's the area I want to serve, here's how I want to serve them. And having the local interaction through the consortia, I think, can really help with that. So I'm supportive of this resolution.
And I will note it was the efforts of a consortia up in the North State that they brought in the Digital 299 project that was approved of I think the last commission meeting.
Okay. Shall we call a vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 This motion carries. So, item 33 is Commissioner Guzman Aceves, as are 34, 35, and 36.
Thank you. These are all extending statutory deadlines on complaints, item 32 through 35, if you want to consider one motion on all of those, but I'm happy to walk through each of those. And
I'd be comfortable with one motion.
In the interest of consistency, would you like for us to all vote no?
I will decline the answer on that one. Yeah. These are all in general complaints and disputes that have a little different circumstances to each of them that arguably, and some I actually don't know the full details, but essentially the request is for an extension on the timing of each of them. One to October 8th, one to October 13th, and the final one to October 12th. So if I could have a motion to approve that, I'd appreciate it.
I'll move.
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The last item, 36, is a proceeding that I am also asking for an extension on. This is the Water Energy Nexus. And as you know, there was a lot of work done by one of our predecessors, Commissioner Sandoval, to do a lot of important work during the drought in particular, and allowing for a wider range of investments on the energy front to capture some water conservation. I think now we have the opportunity to step back from this and coordinate with our other sister agencies to discuss what the bigger scope of this proceeding should dedicate its efforts on. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask for an extension until June 25th, 2017.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. So that is our public agenda. And we actually have beat our deadline. And so unless there's anything else that I don't have before me, we did have a management report earlier. Is there anything for the judges? So then we're going to bring up... Commissioner reports, I'm sorry. My apologies. Who'd like to go first?
I have a couple of brief reports. First, I wanted to note that my staff and I had the opportunity to participate in a energy equity tour organized by the California Environmental Justice Alliance, CEJA. They proactively have identified tours to take interested parties on in Los Angeles, San Diego, and the Richmond area, Richmond and Oakland. And I commend to all my fellow commissioners to participate in one of these tours And the idea and the value of it was to expose us to the variety of different initiatives and projects, environmental justice issues that are going on in a particular community. And we were able to have a very thoughtful and fruitful discussion without getting into any of the current proceedings. And some of we went to visit several sites in Huntington Park and the city of Vernon. The city of Vernon is an industrial city, 50,000 people go there to work every day, but only 150 people live there. And it is home to various industries I think most of us would prefer not to have in our backyard, including several recycling facilities. And it was a reminder that even though recycling is overall done with a good intent for the environment, it still is a dirty business in itself. And we saw the site of the former Exide battery recycling plant, which has caused some environmental harm. So just in terms of some major takeaways from the conversation, one was that communities that are dealing with environmental justice and toxic issues are dealing with a host of different issues. It was helpful to see that the community was addressing issues related to transportation, water, energy. And so we have one role, but there's lots of different agencies that they're coordinating with. Two, that the community has really taken a leadership role for decades in terms of identifying issues and working with companies and government agencies to correct harms, and they remain committed and hopeful. We had several community members on the bus with us who just kept saying, "We love this community. Thank you for seeing what we're dealing with." And then the need to have more opportunities for conversations with communities. Oftentimes, recently my interaction with SEHA and this audience has been through contentious proceedings. And when we're in a rate setting proceeding, considering a contract approval for a power plant, our conversations are necessarily limited. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice mutually because we're not able to hear their full perspective or for them to appreciate ours. So I want to find more opportunities to have these conversations outside of these formal proceedings, so that we can all come into a better understanding with these proceedings. The second is that I participated in my first broadband council meeting representing the commission. Commissioner Sandoval previously has represented the commission. Amy Tong, Director of California Department of Technology, is the chair of the committee. Senator Ben Waso is vice chair. It was a very productive and informative meeting. Many thanks to our staff, particularly Rob Osborne, for his coordination work in that area. As was already mentioned, some of the interesting topics covered were the connection between broadband and economic development. There were several presentations on 5G, kind of future mobility networks, and what these networks should be used for as we move to perhaps autonomous cars and more Internet of Things. These types of technologies may require different infrastructure than our cell phones do, and so there was a very interesting discussion on that. And then we also had an update regarding legislation, particularly what's happening with CASF. There seems to be a good coalition of folks working to identify how to improve that program as we move forward. So thank you for supporting my representing the commission in that forum, and I look forward to bringing updates to you as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you for your update on the SEHA tour. I'm doing a tour in May, so thank you to them for arranging these and reaching out and setting these up. I'm looking forward to it. I just wanted to note that in the Aliso Canyon OII, we are going to be holding a pre-hearing conference and a public participation hearing on April 17th. It's kind of unusual to have a PHC and a public participation hearing because public participation hearings usually don't happen quite so early in a proceeding. But this proceeding is to examine the long-term viability of the Aliso Canyon gas storage facility. There's been a high level of community interest and engagement. And so we want to make sure that throughout this proceeding, we have plenty of opportunity for residents and members of the larger LA community to participate in this proceeding. So we'll be doing that on April 17th. Thanks.
My office and I are going on a tour on next Friday as well in Richmond, so we're looking forward to that. I wanted to introduce Sandy Goldberg, who just joined my office as an advisor on Monday. Sandy previously was a senior counsel at the Office of Planning and Research and worked for about 20 years at the California Attorney General's Office in the Environment Section with a brief foray at the Coastal Commission. And Sandy's going to be working on energy and water and safety issues, so I'm delighted to welcome Sandy.
Just a quick update. I did go to a Water Elected Latinos conference 2 weeks ago in San Diego, where there was a lot of discussion on some of the leading policy issues, and most of the participants were local elected officials. A lot of discussion on access and affordability, and a lot of constraints on both the private and public water infrastructure needs of the state. But it was mostly a good kind of helping build local elected officials who may not always be directly regulating or in charge of managing the infrastructure that their citizens utilize. So that was nice to be a part of. And while I was there, I did get to meet with one of the local supervisors and some of the local transportation officials and talk through some of their issues. Similar to here in Sonoma, they have a lot of, they're not as far along as you on the CCA front, but there's a lot of discussion of that issue in San Diego, a lot of different perspectives on that. And also, like here, they're working on a lot of local rail upgrades in their transportation services. And I look forward to helping build that working relationship even further. I also wanted to just give a quick shout out to one of my new though temporary but very critical staff, Dave Gampson, who all of you know, who's worked for the PUC for a long time, and I think has served as an advisor for maybe one or two of you. And Dave has been lended to us, fortunately, from the ALJ division to help our team during this time of transition. So thank you, Dave.
And I'd like to introduce Rohima Mali, who's joining my staff as our assistant. And Rohima Mali comes to us from lengthy experience in both the Attorney General's office, the State Treasurer's office, and more recently with the Division of Business Oversight, the Department of Business Oversight. So I'm really pleased to have her on my staff. She'll be working out of Sacramento. That's it? Okay, great. Sorry that I forgot about Commissioner comments. Yeah. So again, not having heard any other issues that we need to bring up today, I'm going to adjourn the public meeting. So please clear the room. We're going to bring up a quick action here. Then we're going to adjourn to City Clerk Room 9. Okay. So.